The day began like any other on Earth, with people busy in their work, children going to school, and markets filled with voices of life. No one knew that everything was about to change forever across the galaxy. The Alien Council had been watching humanity for many years. They saw humans spread to nearby systems, build colonies, and send explorers into places no other species dared. The Council feared this fast rise, and in secret they planned their move. They prepared fleets, trained soldiers, and waited for the day to strike. When the day came, they made sure the whole galaxy could see it. The broadcast started suddenly. It cut across every channel. Screens in homes, offices, and ships turned black. Then the image of tall alien figures appeared, their bodies covered in shining armor, their faces cold and merciless. The council speaker raised his hand and declared with a voice that echoed across worlds, "Humanity, you have grown too fast. You have ignored the warnings. You have claimed worlds that are not yours. For this crime, we declare war upon you." The message repeated again and again in every human city and colony. The sound of those words created fear in every heart. On Earth, people froze in shock. A mother dropped the plate. She was holding a teacher, stopped mid-lesson as the screen lit up behind her. In crowded streets, men and women gathered around giant displays to listen again. Children cried and parents held them close. Leaders rushed to their offices. Alarms rang through military bases. The sudden wave of panic spread like fire. People whispered, "Could this be real? Are they serious? Why would they attack us? What did we do wrong?" In a small apartment in New York, a young officer named Daniel sat on his couch watching the broadcast. His uniform was folded neatly beside him. He had always dreamed of serving the fleet, but he never thought he would face something like this. His phone buzzed with messages from friends, all asking the same question: what now? He looked out the window at the busy city, and for the first time he wondered if the lights outside would soon go dark. Far away, in a research lab in Houston, a scientist named Claire was studying energy patterns when the broadcast filled the room. Her hands trembled as she adjusted her glasses. The screen glowed with the Alien Council's stern faces. She felt her chest tighten with fear, but also with curiosity. What did these aliens know that humans did not? Why strike now? She whispered to herself. She saw her co-workers staring in silence. No one knew what to say. Around the world, leaders came together in an emergency meeting. The president spoke with generals, scientists, and diplomats, all trying to make sense of the situation. Some demanded negotiations. Others said the aliens would never listen. Some called for surrender, but most knew humanity had no choice but to defend itself. Fleets were ordered to gather. Colonies were told to evacuate weapons. Factories were put into overdrive. People were asked to remain calm, but no one felt calm at all. Daniel was called to report to the Fleet Academy within hours. He packed a small bag, hugged his younger sister, and told her to stay safe. She asked him, "Will you come back?" He smiled. But inside, he was not sure what would happen. Claire was also called. She received a message from a government official telling her to prepare for new assignments. Her research on energy fields might now be used for war. She thought about her family in California and wondered if she would ever see them again. The news spread to every corner of the human colonies. Miners on Mars, engineers on Europa, settlers on Titan, all stopped their work to listen. The words of the Alien Council rang out across the stars: "You will be destroyed. Your rise ends here." Some colonists cried, some grew angry, and some swore they would fight to their last breath. Refugee ships already began moving toward Earth as scouts reported alien fleets forming on the edges of human space. Daniel boarded a transport that would take him to orbit. He looked around at the young men and women beside him, all wearing the same expression, a mix of fear and determination. Some whispered about their families. Others stared in silence. One older officer tried to calm them, saying, "Humanity has faced hard times before, and we will stand together." But deep down, even he knew this war would be unlike anything before. Claire left her lab and headed to a secure facility guarded by soldiers. Her mind raced with possibilities. She thought about the alien weapons. What power did they use? How strong were their shields? She had so many questions, but no time for answers. She knew her work could mean the difference between survival and extinction. As she entered the facility, She saw dozens of scientists already there, waiting orders from military leaders. Night fell on Earth, but no one slept. The streets were filled with anxious people watching the skies. Soldiers patrolled the city's news reporters tried to explain what little they knew, but there were no clear answers. Some people prayed. Some packed to flee to remote places, and some protested demanding peace, while others shouted that humanity must fight back. In every heart there was fear, but also something else. A spark that refused to die. Daniel looked at the stars from the transport window, wondering if tomorrow would bring battle. He remembered his training, the lessons about strategy and courage, but nothing could prepare him for the thought of alien ships descending on Earth. He clenched his fists and told himself he would not let fear control him. Claire sat in her new lab, staring at the data screens. She whispered softly, "We will find a way there. Has to be a way." Outside, the skies of Earth shimmered with the glow of defense fleets gathering, and humanity waited for the storm to come. The days after the alien broadcast moved like a storm across humanity. The message was repeated again and again. The Council had made their decision. They would wipe out humanity, and nothing would stop them. Fear spread, but at the same time a fire grew inside people. The thought that they would stand together against an enemy that wanted them erased gave them strength. Governments declared emergency law. Fleets were called back from deep space, every dockyard and shipyard filled with workers, day and night, building, repairing, arming ships as fast as possible. The quiet days of exploration were over and the days of survival had begun. Daniel arrived at the Fleet Academy, where thousands of new recruits were already standing in lines. The air was filled with the sound of boots and commands. He felt the weight of what was coming, but he also felt a strange calm, knowing that everyone around him shared the same purpose. He was assigned to a new warship being built in orbit, a vessel that would carry hundreds of lives into battle. As he put on his uniform, he thought about his sister back on Earth, and he swore to himself that no matter what happened, he would fight, so that she could live free. Claire worked in the secure facility. Surrounded by scientists from different countries, the room buzzed with voices arguing over data streams, alien signals and fragments of recovered tech from earlier encounters. They had little information, but every small piece mattered. Claire kept her focus, studying strange energy readings. She believed the alien weapons used frequencies that could be mapped and maybe resisted. Her team leader told her to keep digging because any discovery, no matter how small, could mean survival for entire fleets. She nodded, knowing that every second counted out. In the colonies, the war had already begun. Alien raiders struck outposts, destroying power stations and leaving smoldering ruins. Refugee ships raced toward Earth, carrying survivors who told horrifying stories of burning skies and falling cities. Some described alien soldiers, tall and armored, crushing resistance with weapons that no human had ever seen before. News of these attacks spread fast, and with every story the resolve of humanity grew stronger. Anger mixed with fear and turned into determination. Men and women who had never thought of war now volunteered in millions. Factories turned from cars to tanks and weapons. Farmers sent food to feed soldiers. Students trained in emergency drills. The whole of humanity became one giant force waiting to rise. Daniel stood in the docking bay of the new warship as it floated above Earth. The ship gleamed silver with rows of cannons and missile bays. It was not the largest ship in the fleet, but it was powerful and fast. When he stepped aboard, he was greeted by his captain, a stern woman named Laura, who told the crew, "This ship will not only defend Earth, it will strike back. We will show them that humans are not weak." Daniel felt a surge of pride hearing her words. He walked through the corridors, meeting other officers and sailors, all carrying the same look of determination mixed with fear. Each of them knew that the first battle could also be their last. Claire spent long nights without sleep, staring at glowing screens and streams of numbers. She kept seeing patterns in the alien signals, strange pulses that did not match any known technology. She began to suspect that the alien weapons relied on power cycling through narrow frequencies. If that was true, there might be a way to disrupt them. But she needed proof. Every time she closed her eyes, she dreamed of burning colonies, and she forced herself awake, whispering, "I cannot stop now. The fate of millions depends on this." The president of Earth gave a speech broadcast to every colony and every home. The words were simple. Humanity did not ask for this war, but humanity will finish it. We will not bow. We will not run. We will fight for our children, our homes, our future. The speech echoed across the stars, and for the first time since the alien broadcast, people felt something stronger than fear. They felt unity. Daniel watched the speech on the bridge of his ship and clenched his fist. Claire heard it from her lab and felt tears in her eyes, knowing she was part of something greater than herself. The first wave of alien fleets appeared on the edge of human space. Scout ships sent warnings back to Earth. The aliens were moving fast and destroying everything. In their path, human fleets scrambled to intercept. Battles erupted near the colonies. Bright flashes of fire filled the void. Daniel and his ship were not yet in the thick of battle, but they listened to the reports' voices over the comm channels, calling for help. Then falling silent one by one, the weight of those losses pressed on every heart, but it also hardened them even more. Claire's team received fragments of alien wreckage from one of these early battles. She rushed to the hangar, where the twisted metal still smoked under bright lights. She touched the surface of the armor and saw the strange energy lines pulsing faintly through it. She turned to her team and said, "This is it. We have to crack this before they reach Earth." She began running new tests faster and faster, driven by the thought that every minute lost was another ship destroyed, another family killed. Daniel trained endlessly with his crew, running battle drills until their bodies ached. They practiced firing sequences, damage control, boarding defenses, every scenario the captain could imagine. Some nights he lay in his bunk, staring at the ceiling, listening to the quiet hum of the ship outside. The stars glowed cold and distant, and he thought about how many lives rested on the choices of people like him. He promised himself he would not break when the time came. Claire drank cup after cup of coffee as her eyes grew red. But her mind kept pushing forward. She began to see the shape of a possible solution, though. It was still fragile, like glass. Refugee ships arrived at Earth in growing numbers, filling the skies above the planet. With desperate souls looking for safety, they brought with them not only fear, but also stories of courage. Farmers, who stood against armored aliens with only old rifles. Children who guided survivors through burning forests. Miners who fought until the tunnels collapsed around them. These stories spread across Earth, giving people strength and showing that even against overwhelming odds, humanity refused to break. Daniel's ship received its first mission orders. They were to escort a convoy of supply ships to a colony still under threat. The crew grew silent when they heard the mission. They knew the aliens could strike at any time. Daniel looked at their faces and saw the same thought in every eye. This was no longer training. It was real war. He strapped himself into his seat as the ship prepared to jump. Claire, meanwhile, was called to brief a group of military leaders. Her hands shook as she presented her early findings about alien weapons. She told them there may be a weakness in their systems, but I need more time and more data. The generals told her to keep working because any breakthrough could turn the tide. As Daniel's ship left orbit and entered the darkness of space, he felt a chill. He knew that out there beyond the stars, the enemy was waiting, and soon he would come face to face with them. Claire watched her data streams light up with new readings from the front. She whispered to herself, "We can do this. We must do this." Across the galaxy, fleets moved, civilians prayed, soldiers trained, and leaders planned, every moment heavy with suspense. The war was no longer coming. It had already begun, and humanity stood ready to fight back. Daniel's ship drifted through the silence of deep space, the stars stretching endless around them. The convoy of supply ships followed closely, their engines glowing faintly. The crew moved through the halls of the warship, checking systems and preparing weapons. Everyone knew the aliens could appear at any moment. The tension was heavy, but no one spoke of fear. Instead, they worked quietly, their faces hard and focused. Daniel stood on the bridge beside Captain Laura, watching the stars and waiting. His heart pounded in his chest, though he kept his face calm. He had dreamed of space battles as a child, but now that they were real, the dream felt heavy and cold. Back on Earth, Claire sat in her lab, surrounded by glowing screens. She studied alien energy patterns and fragments of wreckage. Her mind raced faster than her hands. She filled page after page with notes while her team tested samples. The alien technology was advanced, but it was not perfect. She saw faint flaws in their energy, cycling something that could be disrupted. She needed more data, but the battles were happening far away. She whispered to herself, Hold on out there just a little longer. We are close. Daniel's ship had been traveling for days without trouble when the warning sounded enemy signatures ahead. The bridge grew silent for one breath, then burst into movement. Officers shouting coordinates, shields raised, weapons charged. Captain Laura's voice cut through steady and strong battle stations. All hands, prepare. Daniel tightened his grip on his console as the stars ahead flared with light. Alien ships emerged from the darkness, their hulls black and sharp with glowing lines of energy. They moved like predators, swift and deadly. The convoy panicked, sending distress calls, but the warship held its ground. The first blast lit the void as alien weapons ripped through the dark. Daniel felt the ship shudder under impact. Alarms screamed, damage control teams rushed through corridors, fire suppression. Systems hissed. The captain ordered return fire and the warship unleashed its cannons, bright streaks of energy crossing the space between ships. Explosions blossomed as one alien fighter spun out broken, but the others pressed forward more and more. Appearing from the dark, Daniel realized they were outnumbered 3-1. He thought of the stories told by refugees, entire colonies crushed under alien fleets. But he also remembered the president's words, "We will not bow." The crew worked with frantic precision, targeting weak points, dodging blasts, repairing damage as quickly as it came. One officer shouted, "We cannot hold them all." Captain Laura's eyes burned as she said, "We do not need to hold them all. We need to keep the convoy alive." Daniel relayed commands, adjusting shields, shifting formation. He felt the ship become an extension of his will. The aliens pressed harder, surrounding the convoy. Their weapons tearing through the void. Daniel saw one supply ship explode into fire, debris scattering like sparks. His stomach twisted, but he forced himself to stay focused. The warship dove into the enemy line, firing everything it had, using speed and reckless moves that no alien commander expected. Daniel remembered his training, but also trusted instinct, human instinct to adapt and survive the aliens. Hesitated, confused by the unpredictable tactics, the convoy slipped forward one ship at a time through the chaos on Earth. Claire received the battle data as it streamed in. She leaned closer to her screen, seeing the strange fluctuations in alien weapon frequencies. She shouted to her team, "There it is. The cycle breaks every time they fire heavy shots. If we can time a counterpulse, we can overload them." Her hands shook. As she typed commands into the system testing simulations, the results glowed bright with promise. But she knew she needed confirmation from real battle data. She sent urgent messages to the fleet, begging them to transmit every scrap they could back. In the fight, Daniel's ship took hit after hit, alarms blaring, smoke filling the halls, but still they fought. Daniel saw a friend fall as a console exploded near him, but others dragged the injured away, refusing to stop. The ship was bleeding, but alive. One alien cruiser moved in close, aiming for a killing blow. Daniel shouted coordinates, adjusting weapons for a desperate strike. The cannons fired with all remaining power. Piercing through the alien hull in a burst of fire, the cruiser split. Apart, shockwaves rocking the warship. The crew cheered, but the battle was far from over. The convoy was nearly clear, only 2 ships left to push through. Daniel watched the sensors as more alien reinforcements arrived. He felt his chest tighten. How could they keep going when the numbers kept growing? Captain Laura gave the order to draw the enemy away. She told Daniel to lead the maneuver. His hands flew over the controls, guiding the ship into a daring dive between alien formations. Weapons blazing, the aliens turned to follow, enraged by the reckless human attack. Daniel knew the convoy now had its chance to escape. Claire watched the signals changing, the alien weapons growing unstable under continuous fire. She saw proof of her theory. She turned to her team and said, "This is it, we can break them. We just need to build the device." She knew it would take time, but now she had hope. She felt her exhaustion fade, replaced by determination. Outside her lab, the city was filled with fear, people gathering in shelters. But Claire ignored it all. She had one mission, and she would not stop until it was complete. Daniel's ship shook violently. As more blasts struck, the hull fires spread damage. Crews struggled to hold the lines. Daniel felt the deck lurch as systems failed, but still they fought. The captain stood unyielding, shouting commands as if her voice alone could hold the ship together. One by one, the convoy ships escaped into the dark. Daniel saw their signals vanish into safe zones. Relief washed over him, but it was short-lived as the alien fleet closed in around them. The warship was trapped. The captain turned to Daniel, her voice steady. "We have done our duty now. We fight for survival." Daniel nodded, his mind sharp. Despite the fear, he guided the ship into one last desperate attack, weaving between enemy fire, blasting at close range. The crew shouted in defiance, refusing to give up. Each moment stretched like an eternity. Then suddenly Allied reinforcements arrived, a human fleet jumping into the system. Cannons blazing, the aliens reeled under the surprise strike. Human ships tore into their formations, and for the first time the enemy began to fall back. Daniel slumped in his seat, exhausted, sweat dripping. From his face the warship was scarred and broken, but alive. The convoy was safe. Reinforcements had arrived and the aliens were retreating. He felt pride mixed with grief for the lives lost, but also a burning determination. He whispered to himself, "We can win this, we will win this." Claire received the report and felt her chest swell with relief. The data she now had was enough to prove her theory. She turned back to her team and said, "Let's finish this together. We will give humanity the weapon. It needs to fight back, and the war would never be the same again." Daniel returned from the mission with scars on his ship and heavier scars in his heart. The strike had been a success, but it had cost too many lives. He walked through the silent corridors of the carrier and saw the empty bunks of the men who would never return. The faces of his crew haunted him. Yet he knew he could not stop, because the war was only getting bigger, and every day the aliens grew more determined to crush humanity. Claire had locked herself in the lab again, her hands shaking from exhaustion. But her mind unwilling to rest, she kept running simulations on the alien energy chain system. She was certain she had discovered something greater than before, a way not only to disrupt, but to collapse entire networks across vast distances. She tested one scenario after another, watching as entire fleets in her model shut down like broken machines. The idea gave her hope, but also fear, because she knew such a plan would put Daniel and the fleet in more danger than ever before. "Admiral," Harris called both Daniel and Claire into the council chamber. The air was heavy with tension. The room filled with officers, some angry, some afraid, some desperate. Harris said the alien council had made its move. They had united their divided clans into one single war machine, and they were now sending 3 great fleets directly toward human space. One would strike the frontier colonies, one would circle behind to cut supply lines, and one would march toward Earth itself. Silence filled the room as the scale of the threat became clear. Harris turned to Claire and asked if her research could give them any chance. Claire spoke carefully, her voice calm, but her eyes determined. She said if they could hit the alien chain at the right point, it could cause a collapse across all fleets connected to that chain. The officers argued loudly. Some said it was impossible, some said it was madness. But Daniel stood and said humanity had no choice. They could not fight fleet against fleet. They had to fight with brains, not just guns. Harris finally nodded and gave the order. Preparations would begin for the boldest mission humanity had ever attempted. Claire was tasked with building the disruptor system on a scale never before tried, and Daniel was ordered to train his crews for the deepest strike into enemy space they would face. Days turned into weeks. The shipyards worked without rest, building new weapons, repairing old ships, training young recruits who had never seen battle. Daniel walked among them, teaching them simple lessons of survival, telling them to trust each other above all else. He remembered his own first days in uniform and knew these recruits felt the same fear. But he also saw the same spark in their eyes, the spark that made humans dangerous because fear never killed their will. Claire worked with engineers around the clock. She barely slept. She ate little. She lived inside the endless codes and circuits. She designed massive disruptor charges that could be delivered into the heart of the alien system. She tested them again and again, though she knew real battle would be different. She grew close to the crew who helped her, young men and women who trusted her, even when she doubted herself one night. She broke down thinking of how much death her invention could bring. But Daniel found her in the lab and reminded her that her work was not about death, but about survival. He told her every life saved would be because of her courage. She looked into his tired eyes and found strength again. When the day of departure came, the fleet looked smaller than ever compared to the enemy, but each ship carried a fire stronger than steel. Daniel stood on the bridge wearing his worn uniform, his crew At their stations, Claire on the deck nearby monitoring the disruptor system. The fleet engines roared as they jumped into the void, heading straight toward the heart of enemy space. The journey was long and filled with shadows they had to slip past. Patrols dodged traps and used false signals to hide their path. Daniel ordered silence across the fleet. No unnecessary comms, no lights, no noise. Every moment was tense, every jump a risk. Sometimes they drifted quietly near enemy stations watching. Massive fleets passed by without knowing humans were hiding so close one mistake would mean death. But they endured. During the quiet hours, Daniel often spoke with Claire. They talked not only about war, but about Earth, the forests, the oceans, the cities. That seemed so far away. Claire told him about her childhood, her love for books and stars. Daniel told her about his sister, and the promise he made to keep her safe. These small talks gave them strength. They reminded them why they were fighting, not just for survival but for life itself. At last they reached the system that intelligence believed held the core of the alien chain. It was vast, filled with stations glowing with energy and guarded by fleets that stretched across the stars. It looked impossible. Daniel felt the weight of it pressing down on him, but he forced himself to stay calm. He ordered the fleet to hold position while Claire ran her final tests. She confirmed the hub was here, hidden inside the largest station. If they could strike it with the disruptors, it could cripple the alien fleets across the galaxy. But the aliens were not blind. They had expected resistance. They had laid heavy defenses. And soon they detected the human presence. Alarms spread across. The system fleets began to move. Daniel knew they had been discovered. He gave the order to attack. There was no more hiding. The human fleet roared forward, weapons blazing, engines burning the void filled with fire as the two sides clashed. Daniel's ship shook under heavy fire alarms, screamed, crew shouted, but he kept his voice steady. Telling them to trust him to hold the line, they fired disruptor charges at smaller nodes around the system, each one causing bursts of chaos among enemy ships. Claire guided them with calm precision, her hands never stopping as she fed new coordinates and recalculated patterns. The enemy resisted fiercely, but the humans pushed harder, every loss only fueling their fury. The battle raged for hours, ships burning, wreckage drifting, screams echoing across comms. Daniel's fleet was battered, but still fighting. Claire finally shouted that the path to the hub was open. Daniel gave the order to dive straight into the heart of the storm. They weaved through endless fire, pushing closer to the massive station that pulsed like a living heart. The hub glowed brighter as if it knew its life was threatened. The alien fleets threw everything at them, desperate to protect it. But Daniel refused to stop. He told his crew that if this was their last fight, then they would make it. One the galaxy would never forget. As they reached the outer defenses, Claire activated the disruptor system, her voice trembling as she counted down the seconds. The charges flew across space, hitting the hub with a thunderous blast. Lights flickered. The station shook, but it was not enough. Daniel shouted to push closer to deliver more charges. His ship burning, his crew bleeding. But still alive, they pressed forward until the hub loomed before them like a mountain of light. Claire triggered the final sequence and the system screamed with energy. The hub shook violently, cracks spreading across its surface. The alien fleets faltered, their chain-breaking ships drifting helplessly. Across the stars, Daniel saw it happening. The impossible was becoming real. Claire's theory was true. The hub was breaking. The enemy fleets were falling apart, but the shockwave was coming and his ship was caught inside. Alarms blared. Lights failed. The crew held on as the void itself seemed to tear apart. Daniel closed his eyes for a moment, thinking of Earth, of his sister, of Claire beside him. He smiled, even as fire filled the sky. The battle was not yet won, but the heart of the enemy had been struck. The hub collapsing, the fleets breaking, the galaxy changing forever. Daniel could not forget the sight of the burning cities he saw in the alien territory during his last mission. He remembered the cries of the prisoners who looked at him with hope, and the bodies that were scattered across the metallic streets. His heart was heavy with guilt and rage because he knew that the aliens had no limits when it came to cruelty. Yet he also knew that humanity was stronger than fear, and stronger than pain. The Council wanted to make humans kneel, but the fire of defiance burned brighter with every attack and every insult. Claire was still working deep inside the research station, Her eyes red from long nights of calculations and testing her hands, shaking from fatigue, but her mind, sharper than ever she had, discovered a hidden weakness inside the alien fleets. They relied on an energy flow system that was spread across thousands of ships. Like a chain, one broken link could throw the entire chain into chaos. She wrote her findings in detail and sent them to the fleet commanders through encrypted channels, but she worried if there was enough time to test the plan before the alien fleets closed in. Daniel was called to the command deck of the carrier. He stood in front of Admiral Harris, a man with tired eyes and a voice that carried weight. Harris told him that reconnaissance showed 3 alien fleets forming a trap around a nearby colony. They were trying to bait humanity into sending relief forces. Daniel was ordered to lead a small group of fast strike ships to break the trap and evacuate the civilians. Daniel nodded, though he knew the mission was dangerous, almost impossible. He thought of his sister who lived on a distant colony and wondered if she too would one day need saving. When the fleet jumped into the system, the trap was already closing. Hundreds of alien ships surrounded the planet, and beams of light fired across space. The colony sent desperate messages of distress, their defenses breaking under the storm. Daniel gave orders with calm precision. Though inside his chest his heart pounded, he pushed his strike ships forward like knives cutting through a storm, their engines screaming as they dodged enemy fire. Daniel's ship shook with every impact, alarms blaring and crew shouting, but he kept his voice steady, telling them to hold the line. Claire, meanwhile, was testing her theory with simulations. She created models of alien energy chains, and when she disrupted one link, the entire system lost. Balance for a moment, ships lost power, weapons froze, engines stalled. It was only for seconds, but seconds could decide victory. She realized that if Daniel could deliver specialized disruptor charges into key points of the alien formation, it could trigger a cascade failure. She sent the data to the command fleet, but she was not sure if it would reach Daniel in time. Daniel's strike ships managed to break through the first wave, but the second wave was stronger, larger, and deadlier. Alien cruisers blocked their way, firing heavy beams that shook the shields. Daniel ordered his team to split, some to draw fire, some to push through the middle. His own ship dived low, close to the planet atmosphere, using gravity to slingshot and gain speed. The alien cruisers followed, but his risky move confused their formation for a moment. Then a sudden message came through. It was Claire. Her voice shaky but filled with determination, she explained her theory quickly. Daniel listened, his mind racing. He knew it was risky, but it was the only chance. He ordered his crew to prepare the disruptor charges. They had never been tested in real combat. But there was no choice. The strike group charged directly into the heart of the alien chain. Daniel's ship took hit after hit, the hull glowing red with heat panels sparking. The crew shouted warnings, but Daniel kept going. They dropped the first disruptor, and for a moment nothing happened. Then suddenly several alien ships around them flickered. Their shields dropped, engines slowed, weapons misfired, the chain was breaking. Daniel's eyes widened with hope. He ordered more charges to be deployed, one by one. The charges created shockwaves through the alien fleet. Entire sections of the formation lost power, drifting helplessly as human ships cut them down. The trap was crumbling, but the aliens were furious. They redirected massive fire toward Daniel's group. His ships were battered one after another, some exploding in bright flashes of light. Daniel felt the loss like a knife, but he could not stop now. He shouted to his crew to hold on, to push forward, to make every second count. They had to open the way for reinforcements to arrive. At the same time, Admiral Harris ordered the main human fleet to jump in using the gap. Daniel created the massive ships appeared like steel giants, their cannons blazing beams tearing through the weakened alien fleets. The balance was shifting. Humanity was no longer trapped. Humanity was striking back. The colony below cheered as evacuation ships began to launch under the protection of the fleet. Daniel's ship, nearly destroyed, drifted in the chaos, his crew bruised and bloodied. But alive, Claire watched the reports from the command station, tears rolling down her cheeks. She could not believe it worked. She felt relief but also fear, because she knew the aliens would adapt. They would not make the same mistake twice. They would study their losses and prepare new weapons. But humanity had also learned something. They had discovered that even the strongest chains could break if you struck the right link. Daniel was finally able to speak to Claire through a secure channel. His voice tired but steady. He thanked her for saving them. She replied that it was his courage that made it possible. Both knew this was just the beginning because the Alien Council would never forgive this humiliation. The war was far from over, but hope had grown stronger. In the Alien Council chamber, the leaders were in chaos. Their fleets destroyed their trap, broken their pride shattered. One of the elder voices demanded total war. Another demanded the use of weapons forbidden even among their kind. They could not understand how Deathworlders with fragile bodies and short lives could stand against empires that lasted thousands of years. Yet they were forced to admit humanity was not weak. Humanity was dangerous. They had declared war on humans, but now they feared the price of their decision. Daniel looked out the cracked viewport of his ship at the stars filled with wreckage. He knew many more battles were coming. He knew more friends would die and more colonies would burn. But he also knew something else. Humanity would never surrender. Humanity would fight until the last breath. Claire sat in her lab staring at the endless codes and simulations preparing for the next move. Her heart heavy, but her spirit unbroken. The war across the stars was only beginning. But for the first time, humanity was not running. Humanity was fighting back and the galaxy would never be the same again. Daniel sat inside the damaged command chair of his ship as engineers worked to repair broken systems around him. The air smelled of smoke and burnt wires. The sound of sparks echoed in the corridors. He closed his eyes for a moment, trying to rest, but the voices of his crew and the memory of the battle haunted him. His ship had barely survived the last fight, and many of his friends did not come back. He felt heavy guilt, but also pride because they had saved thousands of civilians and destroyed a fleet that was supposed to crush them. Claire was back in her lab surrounded by screens filled with alien codes and human data. Her hair was tied back in a messy knot, her eyes fixed on the numbers that scrolled endlessly. She was tired, but she knew there was no time to stop. The aliens had suffered a defeat, but they would never stay quiet. They were already preparing another assault. The signals intercepted by human intelligence showed strange movements across alien territories. Large fleets gathering near the outer edges of human space. The Council was desperate for revenge, and they wanted to show the galaxy that humanity could not be allowed to grow. The command gathered inside a large chamber aboard the flagship. Admiral Harris sat at the head, his voice grave as he explained the situation. They had little time to rebuild their fleets and train new recruits, but the aliens were already moving. Harris said that the next battle would not be a trap, it would be a storm, and humanity had to be ready. Daniel stood and told the Council that humans could not just wait and hide behind defenses. They had to strike first before the enemy brought war to Earth. And the inner colonies, many argued that it was reckless. But Claire agreed with him. She explained her new discovery. The alien chain system was not only vulnerable, it was also connected to a central hub hidden deep inside alien space. If humanity could strike that hub, it would cripple their fleets across the galaxy. The idea shocked the Council. It was bold, dangerous, and almost impossible, but it was the only way to change the balance. Harris finally agreed. He looked at Daniel and told him that he would lead the mission. Daniel accepted, though his heart was heavy. He knew this could be the last fight of his life. Claire insisted on joining the mission because only she could guide them through the alien systems. She had studied their codes, their signals, their weaknesses, and she believed she could lead them to the hub even if it meant risking everything. The mission began with silence. Their fleet was smaller than ever. Many ships damaged from the last battle. Many crews young and untested. Yet the fire in their hearts was stronger than fear. They jumped across the stars, moving closer to the hidden hub, passing through enemy patrols and avoiding traps. Daniel sat on the bridge, calm and focused, giving orders with steady voice. His crew trusted him with their lives. Claire worked beside the engineers, connecting her simulations to the ship systems, guiding them through alien defenses with her knowledge. As they approached the hub system, they saw the largest fleet ever gathered by the Council, hundreds of ships glowing with deadly light guarding the massive station that pulsed with energy. The hub was the heart of their power, the center of their chain. The reason their fleets could act as one. Daniel knew there was no turning back. He gave the order to attack. The human fleet surged forward, weapons firing, engines roaring. The The stars filled with fire as ships clashed in chaos. Beams cut through shields, explosions shook the void, and screams echoed across the comms. Claire worked furiously, her hands flying across the console she sent out. Disruptor codes based on her research trying to break the flow of the hub. The alien defenses resisted, fighting back with overwhelming power. Daniel pushed his fleet into the center of the storm. Sacrificing speed for impact ships exploded around him one after another, but the humans kept fighting, their voices shouting through the comms with pride and fury. They were not afraid anymore. They were Deathworlders, and they would not kneel. The hub glowed brighter, releasing waves of energy that shook even the largest human ships. Claire shouted that they had to strike the core with the disruptor charges at the exact moment of overload. Daniel gave the order. His ship dived straight toward the hub, dodging enemy fire weaving through wreckage. His crew held on as the hull burned pieces, tearing away alarm screaming. Daniel kept his eyes forward, his voice calm, telling them to trust him. They reached the core chamber of the hub and released the disruptor charges. Claire triggered the sequence, her voice trembling as she counted down. The hub shook violently. Lights flashing, systems collapsing. The alien fleet suddenly faltered, their weapons, failing engines shutting down. The chain was breaking across the stars, alien ships drifting helplessly. Entire fleets cut off from command. Daniel's ship was caught in the blast, the shockwave throwing them across space systems, shutting down panels, exploding. He was thrown from his chair, blood running down his face. But he smiled because he knew they had done it. Claire grabbed his arm, trying to hold him steady, her own eyes wet with tears but filled with relief. The human fleet rallied, striking the helpless alien ships, cutting them down one by one. The galaxy shook as the once unstoppable fleets of the Council fell apart. The news spread fast across colonies and empires. Everyone saw that humanity had done the impossible. They had broken the chains of their enemies and proved that no power could crush them. The alien council sat in, silence, broken and humiliated. Some demanded surrender, others demanded revenge, but all of them knew the truth. Humanity had changed the galaxy forever. Daniel lay in the medical bay, his body weak, but his spirit strong. He listened to the reports of victory, his people cheering across the stars, his crew visiting him one by one with smiles and tears. Claire sat beside him, refusing to leave his side. She told him that his courage had carried them all, and he told her that her mind had given them the key. They were two parts of the same fight, one of steel and fire and one of knowledge and light together. They had given humanity a chance. Earth celebrated like never before. The streets filled with people cheering, singing, raising flags. The colonies lit their skies with fireworks, messages of unity spreading across the networks. Humanity was no longer a small, fragile race struggling to survive. They were warriors, builders, thinkers, dreamers. And now, the galaxy would have to respect them or fear them. Daniel stood on the stage before the crowd, his uniform torn but his head held high. Claire beside him, her hands trembling as the people shouted their names. They did not feel like heroes. They only felt like humans doing what had to be done. But the galaxy saw them as symbols of defiance. In the shadows, the alien council still plotted. They had lost their hub and their pride, but not their hate. They whispered of new weapons, of new wars, yet even they hesitated because they knew that every time they looked at the stars, they would see humanity waiting, ready, unbroken, and dangerous. Daniel looked up at the sky and whispered to himself that the war was not over, but humanity would never stop. He thought of the friends he had lost, of the fire he had seen, and he promised that their sacrifice would never be forgotten. Claire stood beside him, placing her hand on his shoulder, reminding him that hope was still alive. The story of humanity's stand spread beyond the council. Other alien races who once mocked humans now looked at them with awe. Some reached out for peace, others for alliance. Many whispered that perhaps these Deathworlders were not monsters, but a force that could reshape the galaxy in ways never imagined. Daniel smiled at that thought because he knew that even in the darkest of wars there was always a chance for something new to rise. The stars shone bright above the silent battlefield wreckage, drifting endlessly, but inside every human heart a fire burned. Stronger than ever, they had been declared weak. They had been declared prey, but they had shown the truth. They were survivors. They were fighters. They were humans. And across the endless night of space, their enemies would remember the words you declared. War on humanity across star, and you will regret it forever.